Have you ever physically harmed anyone?
No. I'm happy with myself.
You are not guilty.
I'm not guilty.
I made love with the demons within me.
Sure, I get angry.
I'm not a menace to society.
And I wouldn't know, because do the psychopaths know that he's a...
I was okay. I can't really talk about that.
How do people with prominent psychopathic traits speak and behave? What are some of the most important warning signs? The 3 convicted murderers in this video all meet the criteria for antisocial personality disorder, which is characterized by a long-term pattern of irresponsible, manipulative and deceptive behavior, along with a consistent lack of concern for their own safety and, more importantly, other people's safety. People with this disorder often display low neuroticism, meaning that they have a high level of resistance to stress and less chance of experiencing feelings such as fear, sadness and guilt. They are, however, prone to anger. They have a cognitive understanding of right and wrong, but this understanding has little to no effect on their behavior. All 3 of them primarily targeted women. Madsen was convicted of the murder of journalist Kim Wall on board his submarine. Lundin was first convicted of the murder of his mother in North Carolina. Surprisingly, he was then released and murdered an entire family in Denmark. He was dating the mother in the family. Bundy's crimes are the most well known, and he confessed to 30 murders. The one circumstance these murderers share is a strained relationship with their mother.
I go to his house and his mom, would be all down on him, cursing at him or chasing him around, with a fly swatter or whatever. And we'd just be trying to hang out and be kids, and of course that was real hard for him, I'm sure, for him to be there with me and me to see that,
When his parents divorced, Madsen, who was 6 years old at the time, had to choose between living with his father or with his mother. He was only allowed to see the parent he chose once a year. He chose his father. Bundy was born out of wedlock. To avoid the shame that came with it, his mother told him that she was his sister. He eventually discovered the truth about his illegitimacy. In spite of this, it's common for people with prominent psychopathic traits to glorify the past and refer to their childhoods as normal, which unintentionally shows the deception.
I can taste Denmark. I can feel it with my soul. It's in my blood. It's where I need to be. I can taste Denmark. I want Denmark. We lived Solrosstrand. We lived right on the beach. Had a beautiful house on the beach. I just remember, just childhood memories, just playing with little kids. Oh, I had an excellent life. I had a very comfortable life. The typical middle class life. Very comfortable.
And how was your relationship with your mother and your dad?
Oh, me and my parents, we had a great, they were not just my parents, they were my friends as well. And, yeah, I mean, my parents are, they were like, we were a family. Sure.
You, as I understand it, were raised in what you consider to have been a healthy home. And that's part of the tragedy of this whole situation, is because I grew up in a wonderful home with 2 dedicated and loving parents.
They always know what to say, which platitudes to use, in order to give a false impression of how normal everything was, and by implication how normal they are, because surely, if they had such normal upbringings, they can't be all bad, right? Ironically, their need to emphasize how normal they are ends up suggesting that they aren't normal, because people rarely feel the need to convince people about how normal they are.
It's important that people understand this. That basically, I was a normal person. I wasn't a pervert in the sense that, people look at somebody and say, I know there's something wrong with him, and just tell. I mean, I was essentially a normal person. I led a normal life. I want to be quite candid with you. I was okay.
Are you angry?
Sure, I get angry. Very, very angry and indignant. I don't like being locked up. When I like people walking around and ogling me like I'm some sort of weirdo, because I'm not. I'm perfectly happy with the person I am, and I've always been.
I believe what Bundy says. He is happy with himself, but not in the sense that he means it. He says this knowing that he's guilty of the crimes, even though he was denying it. Still, he's able to say that he's happy with the person he is. This speaks to a critical lack of guilt. The point about denial is the other, more pragmatic reason why people with prominent psychopathic traits emphasize normality. Because they're only looking out for themselves, they're constantly looking for ways to deceive people, and they can use normality as grounds for their deceptive claims to not having committed the crimes the way they actually committed them, or not having committed the crimes at all. In the following, Lundin gives a false account of how his mother died. Notice the exaggerated pathos in his voice and demeanor.
One day, one dark afternoon, my mother attacked me, and the only thing I did was push her away. I've never laid a hand on my mother ever. And when she fell down, her neck broke. And when I say if there's anything I could have done to help her, I would have.
Lundin's mother was choked. She didn't die from falling, and in normal families, family members don't attack each other, so this couldn't just have been one dark afternoon as he dramatizes it. He says, the only thing I did, which points to him being very self-aware, as opposed to simply saying what happened. Aware of protecting himself, as he's portraying himself as the victim and the hero who would have done anything to help his mother, as if anyone wouldn't do that. Also, the very phrase, the only thing, suggests that there were other things he did and that he's not telling.
You are not guilty.
I'm not guilty. Does that include the time I stole a comic book when I was 5 years old? I am not guilty of the charges which have been filed against me. And the allegations. I don't know all of what you're speaking about, Lucky. It's too broad and I can't get into it in any detail. But I'm satisfied with my blanket statement that I'm innocent. I've been impolite, and there are things I regret having done in my life. But nothing like the things I think that you're referring to.
Bundy's laughter is contrapuntal, meaning that there's a misalignment between the severity of the crimes they're talking about and his reaction to the question about being guilty. On a surface level, this suggests that he's detached from the seriousness of the situation, but on a pragmatic level, this is his way of evading the question. He evades the question by making fun of the word guilty, a word which isn't inherently funny at all, and mentioning harmless incidents to deceptively make the question seem ridiculous.
Does that include the time I stole a comic book when I was 5 years old? I've been impolite. And
Bundy knows perfectly well what the interviewer is asking him, and the closing makes that clear.
But nothing like the things I think that you're referring to.
So the question wasn't so broad after all. Bundy merely needed these seconds to come up with an answer. He says he can't get into it, suggesting that there is something to get into, and thus that there's more to the blanket statement he claims to be satisfied with.
But I'm satisfied with my blanket statement that I'm innocent.
Notably, Bundy says he's satisfied with that statement. He doesn't say that that statement is true or the only truth. These excerpts emphasize another thing that people with prominent psychopathic traits do, downplaying their criminal behavior.
I don't pay my telephone bills on time, and I don't write my mother as many letters as I should. There are all kinds of things I can improve about myself, but a weirdo knows I feel good about myself. I'm happy with myself.
Bundy mentions things that almost all people could be quote-unquote guilty of at some point in their lives, thereby deceptively underlining how normal he is. Things that are so innocuous that the only reason for mentioning them is to calculatingly appeal to people's emotion and thus understanding.
You don't change. You stay Ted Bundy 24 hours a day.
Well, gee, that name sounds funny. You know, I hear Ted Bundy in so many different contexts. I stay me, okay?
He frequently refers to himself in the third person, which indicates how highly he thinks of himself.
The slasher movies that you're talking about. That stuff is, I'm telling you, from personal experience, as it gets into the home to children who may be unattended or unaware that they may be a Ted Bundy who has that vulnerability to that predisposition to be influenced by that kind of behavior, by that kind of movie.
I stay me, Bundy says convincingly. With this platitude, he gives a false impression of being honest and forthcoming, because does he actually stay himself? Not if we consider the following excerpt. Notice Bundy's emotions that seem to change by the second.
When the judge found you guilty of second-degree kidnapping, you never showed any emotion.
Yeah.
For somebody who believes he is so innocent, why was there no emotion?
My attorney, John O'Connell in Salt Lake, and I've always mused over just how I should behave. What's the right way for Ted Bundy to behave and make sure that people get the right impression? And I just behaved the way I felt was right. Sure, I'm mad, and I'm showing emotion right now because inside I'm mad. I showed no emotion. I felt emotion, believe me. Now, the irony comes here.
Bundy was asked why he didn't show emotion, and he starts by laughing. A few seconds later, however, he starts snorting, imitating sadness. Then he starts sounding angry.
And sure, I'm mad, and I'm showing emotion right now because inside I'm mad.
Before he finishes where he started, laughing.
Now, the irony comes here. Attorney John O'Connell in Salt Lake, and I've always mused over just how I should behave.
Bundy has trouble knowing which emotion to imitate. That's because expression of feelings is a tactic to him, something that he has to think about. It doesn't come naturally. Chris Watts also had trouble faking emotions in court.
I know, like, even my attorneys told me, like, you need to show a little more emotion, because I guess first time I went to the courtroom, I didn't know what to expect. They said I was just a cold person, just looking at me.
And in a very literal sense, and according to himself, Bundy doesn't stay himself.
The issue is how this kind of literature contributed.
Fueled your fantasies.
Well, in the beginning it fuels this kind of thought process. Then at a certain time it's instrumental in what I would say crystallizing it, making into something which is almost like a separate entity inside. To have been possessed by something so awful and so alien, and then the next morning wake up from it.
People with prominent psychopathic traits will regularly distinguish between two entities, two alleged parts of themselves, the good side and the bad side. This is a way for them to blame the separate entity for their wrongdoings, so as to distance themselves from their crimes and avoid holding themselves accountable, because the last thing they want is for their normal self-descriptions to be exposed for the lies that they are. Investigators frequently use this two-persons tactic to get suspects to confess.
I can tell that there's just something you're not telling me. So can we talk about two Chris's? Okay. Two Chris's. A tale of two Chris's? Okay. And you need to help me know which Chris I'm looking at today, and which Chris you really are.
When there's another person to blame, it's often much easier to get the suspect to confess, as the suspect doesn't have to hold himself accountable. Thus, Chris Watts can blame the other Chris for what he did, even though the other Chris doesn't actually exist, obviously. There's only one. Lundin is eerily similar to Bundy in his attempts to overemphasize how normal he is, and in referring to someone else inside him. First, his lie about being normal.
I'm not a criminal. I mean, I've never really had no run-ins. A routine traffic checks. That's what my, that's what my criminal history consisted of. I'm not a criminal. I'm not a menace to society.
Never really had no run-ins, Lundin says. The adverb really modifies the statement. Notably, he doesn't say that he hasn't had any run-ins. His language indicates that he's had run-ins, just not really, however he defines that. Unintentionally, then, his own language indicates that he's been involved in more than just routine traffic checks. And then the other person lie.
Every man has a demon that lives within him. But to control that demon, that's the hard part. That's the key. Control, self-control.
Did you in your life meet the demon within you?
Yeah, sure. I met him shake down. I made love with the demons within me.
With this, Lundin makes it sound like everybody's capable of doing what he's done, because he presupposes that everybody has the same living inside them. With this association with other people, he can make it look like he isn't that different from everybody else. However, with these statements, Lundin actually points to the fact that he's anything but normal, and he points to his guilt, because this isn't the typical behavior of someone who's merely been involved in routine traffic checks. People with prominent psychopathic traits are impossible to trust, not only because they give information that's flat out wrong, but also because their statements, and just as important, how they perform their statements, seem contrived. They're constantly self-aware, so there's an element of acting in their behavior. That's the paradox. On the one hand, they do everything they can to be perceived as normal, and on the other hand, they draw attention to behaviors that show that they're anything but normal. They're trapped between deception, the false impression they want to give people, and a constant, exaggerated need of attention. This attention-seeking also involves sounding deep and profound when in reality they're merely stating the obvious. Next, Lundin talks a lot without saying anything.
I mean, I'm showing everybody that if there's a high, there's a low. There's pleasure, there's pain. There's insanity, there's sane. There's silent, there's to tell. There's heaven, there's hell. There's peace, there's war. There's less, there's more. There's high, there's low, there's yes, there's no. There's ice, there's fire. There's honest, there's liar. There's love, there's hate. There's fact, there's fate. There's always, there's never. There's the past, forever. There's day, night, dark, light.
I think the expression, "so what else is new," is fitting here. However, some people confuse his ability to recite something with him being profound or intellectual, which is the reaction that people like Lundin hope for. That's how they deceive their victims, sweeping them off their feet and similar cliches. Psychopathic people are experts in playing on people's emotions and saying what people want to hear.
So when someone's being authentic, you get the feeling that not only that there's a person there in the moment, but somehow you reach into their very essence and you meet a unique individual.
I don't know why, that makes me want to cry. It's beautiful.
Well,
sorry.
I think these are all things that we strive for. You know, we strive as individuals, we strive to break through a type of existential isolation. And even if that human is a machine, somehow we imbue it with that. We even ask the question: is this thing alive? Is this thing thinking?
Yeah. Okay. So.
But why do you think that's
so emotional for me?
Yes.
I don't know. I think because it seems like it's something that I feel like I want it.
People with prominent psychopathic traits want to be seen as dangerous. This also has to do with their need of attention, which is a result of their inflated ego. This flies in the face of their references to being normal, which exposes these references for what they are, a tactic and not who they really are. They're only capable of pretending to be normal up until a certain point.
So free. That didn't really go the way I really wanted that to click.
Also, throughout this entire interview, there's been a misalignment between Lundin's statements and his aggressive facial expressions.
I'm not a criminal. I'm not a menace to society.
Showing the danger right behind the mask, literally. In his final interview, Bundy couldn't or wouldn't keep up his calm facade.
Little Kimberly Leach, 12 years of age. What did you feel after that? Where were you, Ted? I can't really talk about that right now.
The question about this particularly heinous crime flies in the face of the humble and apologetic impression that Bundy's wanted to give the viewers throughout this entire interview. He says he can't really talk about that, indicating that he actually can talk about it. So this is question dodging once again, and referring to himself in the third person gives a sense of imminent danger.
Well-meaning, decent people will condemn behavior of a Ted Bundy while they're walking past a magazine rack full of the very kinds of things that send young kids down the road to be Ted Bundys. Those of us who have been so much influenced by violence in the media are not some kinds of inherent monsters. We are your sons and we are your husbands.
People with prominent psychopathic traits have a deep, maybe even innate desire to scare people. Months before his crime, Madsen was interviewed about his endeavors. Even though the interview had nothing to do with psychopathy, he himself started talking about psychopaths. After his crime, psychologists concluded that Madsen is a psychopath. In the following, Madsen talks about psychopaths, but he's actually talking about himself, hinting at the crime he would later commit. Madsen visibly takes pleasure in talking about this subject.
And I can tell you, and no comparison, I've been very honest in this, and I've been a little bit too open maybe, but you're aware of the fact maybe that psychopaths exist amongst us, human predators. And psychopathic people are often very charismatic. They are excellent speakers. They're convincing. They are having illusions of self-grandeur and have no regard for anyone else.
Psychopaths love when they know more than they're letting on, and more than the people they're speaking with. Here, Madsen pretends to speak generally, while still leaving enough hints for people to think that he might be a psychopath. Madsen is known for being charismatic and convincing. That's how we got most of the world to believe that he could travel into space in a home-built space rocket, and get sponsors to finance that project, but which only showed the delusions of grandeur he mentions. Madsen continues to describe himself, most likely unbeknownst to the interviewer. In the following, notice how his statements become more specific. He goes from the personal pronoun they to he, which indicates something that's closer and more personal.
And he will try really to punish those people who have been under his spell. He will try to punish them afterwards by stalking them, by talking badly about them, all these things.
Bad-mouthing former colleagues and sponsors is exactly what Madsen did. Colleagues and sponsors who had stopped working with Madsen due to his anger, willfulness, and disregard for safety procedures. The idea that he's actually talking about himself is further underlined by the fact that the details he mentions here, stalking and talking badly about other people, aren't unique to psychopaths. So these are his thoughts, what he's done and will continue to do. These are threats. Next he goes from he to I while pointing to himself. This is the most revealing part of the passage.
There is the possibility that you've simply come upon a human predator. And I wouldn't know. Because do the psychopaths know that he's a psychopath? I'm not sure.
Madsen's language indicates that he's sure that he's a psychopath, which is exactly why he says he's not sure. It keeps people speculating, which is what he, Bundy and Lundin all find exciting. Their narcissism knows no bounds. That's it for now. Feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. Until next time.